Let's now get more details on the just concluded climate change conference. We're joined in studio live by Dr. Richard Munang, the African Regional Climate Change Coordinator at the United Nations Environmental Programme. Welcome to Africa Live. Let's first get your thoughts on the just concluded talks and what is in it exactly for Africa.
Thank you very much for having me in studio. I think that Africa have got a lot with the discussions and with the just concluded conference of parties, the COP19. Africa went into this conference urging that the world should be able to replenish the global climate fund called the Green Fund to ensure that the amount of money which was pledged should be replenished to ensure this fund can provide the money which is needed to address climate change in developing countries, especially Africa. And one of the issues was also to look at how the world could come up with a mechanism to address onset events like drought, like floods, as a result of the changing climate. And another was also to look at how the world could agree to reduce emissions by 2 degrees, which, as the International Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change has indicated, if the world reached 2 degrees, the impacts will be catastrophic for the African continent. So these were the issues on the table, and the just concluded COP19 move a step forward towards discussing and putting in place a framework to discuss the legal agreement that will be fostered in 2015 in Paris. So there is progress made, albeit small steps, but the world is moving towards that agreement.
Agreements have been made, progress has been made, as you mentioned there, though. But what exactly has been achieved since the last meeting? Or, when you talk about funds having been set aside for Africa there, what exactly has been achieved since the last meeting? Or is it just pledges and empty talk?
I think there has been progress made. If you look in Cancun, where there was COP16, after Copenhagen, the Green Climate Fund was set up. And also there was a decision that the national adaptation plans for countries, whereby countries can be able to integrate climate change into decision-making frameworks and development processes. That process is currently ongoing and countries are already engaged in that. There's also the adaptation fund, which is a fund that was put in place to help fund adaptation in developing countries. In Warsaw, there was a decision where there were also pledges up to about 100 million put in place to ensure that adaptation can be addressed. Not everything is addressed equally, but at the same time, there is progress that is being made, and as indicated, albeit small steps, there is potentially going to be a kind of a culmination towards an agreement in Lima in 2014, Peru, where the world will come together again, COP20, discuss the elements that were discussed in Warsaw, so that as they move towards Paris in 2015, all the elements that have been discussed and will be discussed in Lima could be put together in a way that the world can actually come to a legal binding agreement and help limit emissions.
How will that adaptation plan, though, assist Africa in getting out of harm's way in the short term?
Well, right up to the COP19 in Warsaw, the United Nations Environment Programme produced a report called the Africa Adaptation Gap Report. And what this entailed was actually to show exactly the impacts that are currently existing in the continent as a result of the changing climate and also the projected impacts. And this report clearly shows that the changing climate change is already having impacts in the continent and is projected to have huge impacts. For example, sea level rise in the African continent is going to be 10% higher than the global mean, disrupting a lot of coastal cities, and in a continent where you have about 26,000 kilometers of coastline, with almost about 32 countries with their coast, with most of the cities on the coastal line. This is going to be a very, very serious issue. For example, Dar es Salaam is going to suffer lost assets up to about 10 billion, and even Mombasa in Kenya is going to suffer asset loss up to about 15 billion in 2050. So putting together adaptation actions which could be able to reduce this vulnerability to climate change is imperative, and the United Nations Environment Programme is pursuing a program in collaboration with other partners called ecosystem-based adaptation, using our ecosystems, our forests, our rivers, our seas, and the services they provide to ensure that they can be able to address the changing climate. There is an example like in Mozambique whereby restoration of mangroves help address some of the climate challenges, and even in Togo, using small dam rehabilitation through ecological-based approaches, have provided water to the communities in this country.
All right, Dr. Richard Munang, Africa Regional Climate Change Coordinator, UNEP. We're going to leave it there for the moment, but thank you for joining us here on Africa Live.